Vienna, 1906. As the bells of the Hofburg Palace struck 6, and the frost-laced air stung like truth, Nadette Marlowe pulled the hood of her velvet cloak tighter around her face and stepped into the courtyard, boots crunching against the snow. Her breath came in soft clouds as she passed beneath the marble arches, where gas lamps flickered low and shadows pooled like secrets. Tonight would be her last as Archduchess of Austria. They called her the quiet swan, at court graceful, obedient, untouched by scandal. But they didn't know she'd spent the past 6 months slipping coded letters beneath silver teapots, meeting a palace guard in a hidden corridor behind the imperial library, or that she no longer believed in thrones or bloodlines. Only in him. His name was Oleander Orton, 25, broad-shouldered, with eyes the color of wet stone and a voice that held more patience than most kings. He wasn't noble, wasn't rich. Just a soldier's son from Graz who had risen through the ranks with clear orders: protect the royal family, never touch them. Which made what happened next a betrayal of everything he'd sworn to. I came as soon as I saw your note, Oleander said, stepping from the shadows beneath a colonnade. His uniform was damp from the snow, his black gloves dusted in white. What's happened? Nadette took his hand, the gesture small but reckless. My father's agreed to the engagement. Prince Lyon of Belgium. The papers will announce it tomorrow. Oleander went still. He's 20 years your senior. 32, yes. Her voice shook, and I've never spoken more than 10 words to him. He looked away, jaw tight. You should go. Back inside. You're freezing. I'm leaving, she said. Tonight. His gaze snapped to hers. What? I've packed only what I can carry. I've arranged safe passage to Trieste. There's a ship. I'll take any name. I'll sweep floors if I must. But I can't marry a man I do not love. I don't want a crown. Oleander stared at her like she'd just stepped onto a battlefield barefoot. You'd give up everything? For a life I choose? Yes. He stepped forward, his voice low. And if I come with you, what happens when they find us? They won't. I'll disappear. You'll be safe if you stay. I didn't ask about me. Silence stretched between them. Then, slowly, he reached for her cheek, brushing away a snowflake. You don't have to go alone. Wherever you walk, Nadette, I'll follow. Even if it costs me the uniform on my back. She trembled not from the cold. They didn't kiss. Not yet. Just stood, forehead to forehead, breath mingling. From the far gate came the crunch of hurried footsteps. Oleander stepped in front of her instantly, hand on the hilt of his saber. It was Captain Trost, red-faced and winded. Orton, the Archduchess has been reported missing from her chambers. You're assigned to search the east wing. Oleander didn't flinch. Yes, sir. Trost narrowed his eyes at Nadette's cloak. And you, madam? I'm a kitchen maid, Nadette said, lowering her eyes. Fetching herbs. Trost grunted and turned. Hurry then. The palace is locked down until she's found. They waited until his steps faded. Then Oleander exhaled. We can't go through the front. There's a tunnel beneath the stables, the old one from the Turkish siege. She nodded. I know it. They moved quickly, staying to the shadows. The stables loomed ahead, silent except for the restless snort of horses. Inside, the scent of hay and leather filled the air. Oleander moved a bale aside, revealing a trapdoor. He handed her a lantern. It's narrow. Watch your step. They descended into darkness. The tunnel was damp, the ceiling low. Nadette gripped his coat for balance. At the end, a rusted gate barred their way. Oleander forced it open with his shoulder, teeth gritted. Beyond lay the city, cold and wide and waiting. She turned to him. You still have time to go back. I made my choice the moment I met you, he said. And then, at last, he kissed her. Deep and sure and steady. But freedom would not come easy. By sunrise, their absence would spark a scandal across 2 empires. And Prince Lyon, humiliated and proud, would not let Nadette vanish without consequence. Nor would her father. But none of that mattered now, because she had given up her crown for love, and a palace guard had just vowed to protect her heart. The tunnel opened behind a row of shuttered warehouses along the Weinfluss, where soot clung to the bricks and the dawn light smeared pink against the frost-glazed river. Nadette's shoes slipped on the stone steps as she emerged, her gloved hand catching Oleander's arm for balance. He steadied her without a word, his breath visible in the morning chill. A low whistle echoed from across the riverbank. A boy in a wool cap darted out from behind a cart, waving once before vanishing into an alley. Oleander nodded once. That's our signal. He'll lead us to the contact who arranged your passage. Nadette didn't ask how he knew the boy. She understood now that Oleander's world extended far beyond the palace gates. Into a Vienna she'd never seen, the one with coded signals, hidden favors, and debts paid in silence. They followed the narrow ways through the outer districts, where chimney smoke coiled over tiled rooftops and the scent of coal fires mixed with baking rye. The city was waking, but they moved like ghosts between its heartbeat, slipping through back doors and shuttered courtyards until they reached a boarding house, with ivy curling up its flaking facade. Inside, a woman with half-gray hair and a mole on her cheek opened the door without speaking. She eyed Nadette's cloak, then Oleander's coat, and gestured for them to follow. They passed through a cramped kitchen into a low room, where a trunk and a stack of folded linens waited beside a travel-stained satchel. "She'll take you as far as Ljubljana," Oleander said quietly, placing a leather packet into the woman's palm. "That should cover the rest." The woman counted the notes briskly, then offered Nadette a plain dress and a pair of scuffed boots. "You'll change here. Leave the cloak." Nadette hesitated. "It belonged to my mother." Oleander stepped forward. "We'll find a way to keep it. For now, it marks you too clearly." She nodded once, then disappeared behind a curtain with the bundle. When she returned, her hair was pinned under a kerchief, and her silhouette, once regal, had softened into that of a merchant's daughter. Oleander looked at her for a long moment. "You still carry yourself like nobility. I don't know how to walk any other way." "You will," he said. "You're learning already." The woman handed Nadette a sealed envelope. "For the conductor. Don't open it." Nadette tucked it into her skirts. "And the ship in Trieste, it's still sailing?" "It leaves in 6 nights, Oleander answered. "If we leave now, we can reach the border before dusk." "We?" Nadette's voice was cautious. "I've arranged leave." He met her eyes. "They'll list me as missing by morning, but they won't connect it to you. Not immediately." She looked down at her hands. "Your mother? She'll hear about it, won't she?" "I left a letter with the boy. She'll understand." He paused. "She always said loyalty meant nothing if it wasn't to the right people." Outside, the sun had risen fully, casting long shadows over the rooftops. Oleander took her bag, and they slipped out the back, into the rhythm of hoofbeats and cartwheels. They walked until the city thinned into fields and scattered cottages. A line of crows circled over a distant orchard. Nadette broke the silence first. "Do you remember the first time you spoke to me?" "After the ambassador's dinner. You were sitting behind the marble screen, listening to the musicians." He glanced at her. "You were humming the second violin's part." "Perfectly." She smiled quietly. "I thought no one heard." "I did. It was the first time I saw you as more than a name." They stopped beneath a linden tree, where the leaves had fallen in gold drifts. Nadette reached for his hand. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "The moment you chose me over everything else?" He brushed a leaf from her shoulder. "I regret every moment before that." From the road ahead, the whistle of a steam whistle carried faintly on the wind. The next train station was less than a mile away. Nadette squeezed his fingers, then let go. "We should keep moving." And they did, toward the border, toward the sea, toward the thin and flickering thread of a life they had chosen for themselves. Behind them, the empire turned slowly, unaware that a crown had been left behind in silence. The train swayed gently as it climbed into the Julian Alps, its windows fogged with breath and frost. Nadette sat beside Oleander in the third-class carriage, her fingers curled loosely around a tin cup of weak broth. The coat draped across her lap had once belonged to a Slovenian farm girl, according to the woman who'd passed it to them at the station. The wool was rough, the sleeves short, but it was warm. Outside, the landscape shifted from snow-dusted fields to pine-covered slopes, the trees tall and hushed as if listening. A shepherd guided a flock across a hillside, their bells faint through the glass. Oleander didn't speak for some time. He stared out at the mountains, a crease between his brows, his hand resting on the satchel at his feet. He hadn't shaved since they left Vienna, and a fine stubble shadowed his jaw. Nadette turned toward him. "What were you before the palace?" He looked at her slowly. "You mean before I was a uniform?" She nodded. "I was a cooper's apprentice. My father made barrels for wine merchants. I helped sand the staves, bind the hoops." He smiled faintly, though it didn't reach his eyes. "I joined the army to avoid the tannery. Thought I'd be a cavalryman, not a glorified statue in brass buttons. I never imagined you in a tannery, she said. I never imagined you running through a border town in someone else's boots. The train rounded a bend, and the sun broke through the clouds, casting light across the valley. Nadette's face warmed beneath it, but her thoughts remained heavy. There's a tunnel after Jesinus, Oleander said quietly. It lasts nearly 7 minutes. Once we pass through, we'll be close to the checkpoint. Will they search the train? Sometimes. Not always. But I've arranged for the conductor to leave the southern door of the next carriage unlocked. If something goes wrong, we slip out during the stop at Les. And after that, we walk. She set down the tin cup. Will you still follow me if there's no road left? There's always a road, he said, even if you have to make it with your own hands. A child began to cry at the far end of the car, and a woman hushed him with a lullaby in Slovene. Nadette rested her head against the window, watching the trees blur past. Oleander's voice was softer now. Do you miss it? She kept her gaze outside. Only sometimes. The library. My cello. The orange trees in the conservatory when they bloomed in February. He waited a moment before asking, And your father? No, she said. Not anymore. The train whistle blew long and low as they approached a narrow gorge. Nadette lifted her head. You never asked what name I'm traveling under. I figured you'd tell me if you wanted to. She reached into her satchel and pulled out a folded parchment. Adelina Vogel. From Graz. Traveling to visit her aunt in Gorizia. Seamstress by trade. He scanned the paper, then passed it back. It suits you. Because it's simple? Because it's yours now. You chose it. The wheels clattered louder as they entered the tunnel, everything swallowed by dark. Nadette's fingers found Oleander's in the blackness. He held them tightly, the warmth of his palms steadying her in the noise and motion. When the light returned, the snow had deepened over the peaks. The train slowed as it approached the next station, steam curling against the ridges. Oleander stood. Get ready. If anything feels wrong, we don't wait. She gathered her things silently. Her heartbeat thudded against her ribs, but she kept her shoulders straight. The brakes hissed. A sharp knock on the door. Then a uniformed border agent stepped inside, eyes scanning the compartment. Papers, he said curtly. Oleander presented his first. The man barely looked at them before handing them back. Nadette's hands trembled slightly as she passed hers forward. The agent studied the parchment longer than necessary. His eyes flicked to her face, then to Oleander beside her. You're traveling alone? My cousin offered to escort me, she said, voice measured. Where in Gorizia does your aunt live? Near the monastery of Kostanjevica. She's a widow. The man's gaze lingered a moment longer. Then he grunted and moved on. They didn't exhale until the door closed behind him. When the train pulled away from Les, Nadette leaned back into the worn leather bench and closed her eyes. I think I forgot how to breathe. Oleander brushed a curl from her temple. You didn't flinch. Not once. I wanted to. But you didn't either. He didn't answer, but his thumb moved slowly across her knuckles in quiet reply. Later, when the tracks began to descend and the scent of mountain pine gave way to damp earth and distant river, Nadette opened her eyes again. What will we do in Trieste? She asked. Find work. Blend in. Wait until the port clears. And after the ship? We live, however we can. She looked at him, truly looked, and saw the future not in castles or coronations, but in the way he carried her bag without asking, in the way he watched the world for danger so she didn't have to. I think I'm ready for that, she said. He smiled not with triumph, but with understanding. And the train continued toward the sea. The wind off the Adriatic carried the scent of salt and rust as Nadette stepped onto the worn planks of the Trieste wharf. Her borrowed boots creaked with each step, the sea shifting beneath the dock in quiet, endless motion. Behind her, Oleander adjusted the strap of their satchel, his coat collar turned high against the spray. Fishing boats bobbed in the harbor, their chipped hulls painted in faded greens and ochres. A gull screamed overhead. The port was louder here. Rougher men shouted in Friulian and Venetian dialects. Crates clattered against stone, and the thud of hooves echoed from the customs yard. But none of it touched her. She watched the horizon. This is it, she said, her voice low. Oleander followed her gaze. The ship leaves at dusk. We've a few hours. She turned to him. Where? He nodded inland. A man named Georgi runs a print shop near the Piazza della Borsa. He owes someone I trust a favor. He keeps a room above the press. It's small but safe. She didn't move. I thought it would feel different. Like a door opening. It is, he said. But open doors don't mean peace. Not yet. They walked through narrow alleys, past shuttered bakeries and laundry lines sagging between crumbling buildings. The press was tucked behind a tobacconist's, the windows smeared with ink and dust. Inside, the air smelled of turpentine and old paper. A man with a limp and an ink-stained apron let them in without a word. Upstairs, the room contained a cot, a stove, and a basin. No mirror, no glass. Oleander set the satchel down and peeled off his coat. Nadette crossed to the window, its panes warped with age. They'll know by now, she said. The engagement will be broken. The scandal. I know. She looked back at him. What will they say about you? That I failed my post. He sat on the edge of the cot. Maybe that I was weak. There was nothing weak in what you did. He didn't answer. She crossed the room and knelt to untie her boots. One lace snapped. She stared at it, then set the boot aside and leaned back on her heels. It's strange, she said after a while. I was raised to believe my value ended where my duty began. But I don't feel worthless now. I feel awake. Oleander watched her from across the room. You were never anything less than whole. They just taught you not to see it. She stood and moved toward the stove, setting a kettle on the iron ring. The fire inside was low, but steady. She fed it a handful of kindling. Tell me something true, she said. Something no one else knows. He leaned back on his palms. When I was 16, I stole a book of poetry from a visiting colonel's trunk. I read it under my blanket for a year and kept it even after he left. It smelled like tobacco and wax. I still remember one verse. She turned. Say it. He hesitated, then recited, voice slow. Wherever the wind turns quiet / and the wild geese pass, without sound / I will wait beside the scent of cedar / and know your footsteps by the hush they leave behind. She said nothing for a long while. Then, quietly, you loved someone before me. He nodded once. It didn't end well. And now? He looked up at her. Now I know the difference between wanting and choosing. She moved to sit beside him. Their shoulders touched. I've never made tea before, she said. The kitchen maids never let me near the stove. We'll ruin it together, then. A bell rang faintly in the distance, marking the hour. She stood and crossed to the basin to wash her hands, dipping her fingers into the chill water. If we board that ship, she said, we'll be strangers to the world. No titles, no protections, just ourselves. He rose and crossed to her, drying her hands with a threadbare cloth. Then let's learn who we are. One evening at a time. She looked up at him. No more hiding. No more. The kettle hissed softly. She didn't reach for it. Instead, she laid a hand against his chest, just above the place where his uniform had once displayed its insignia. Will you read to me tonight? If the light allows it. And tomorrow? He smiled, but gently. Tomorrow, we find the sea. She nodded once, the motion small but sure. And in that quiet room above a printer's shop, with the scent of ink and sea salt between them, Nadette let herself believe in peace not as a distant prize, but as something already unfolding.